are in listen-only mode.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for the Collaboration Institute Model webinar. It's all about this awesome recipe for economic security. And it looks like, from what I'm seeing from the attendees, we have a full house of members from the network today. So we're in good company. And we know how hard you're all working to bring economic security to women and girls in your communities. So we really hope that this webinar opens up the door for your work to expand, or at the very least gets your thinking caps working. So today we partnered with two experts at the Women's Fund of Greater Birmingham, Jeannie Jackson, who's their president and CEO, and Mary Page Wilson-Lyons, the director of strategic initiatives. And joining them is another expert, Gwyn Robinson, the director of community outreach at Jefferson State Community College. And Jefferson State, just a note, they've been instrumental in the last 3 years as the education partner for the Women's Fund. And you'll hear more about that later on in the webinar. So before we dive in, I just want to cover a few pieces of housekeeping. You'll be muted throughout the presentation so we can minimize background noise. However, we know questions will pop up, so if those pop up as the speakers are presenting or having a discussion, we encourage you to submit those questions right in the question box in your control panel, which is probably located on the right-hand side of your screen. Just take a moment to find that now. And if you'd like to ask a question verbally during the Q&A session, just go ahead and click the little hand icon to alert me that you have a question. I'll be able to unmute you. You can share your question directly with our speakers. And it would be great if you could just share a little bit about yourself, such as your organization, your name, or the company that you're with. And that will offer some good background info and context for our speakers so that they can answer or best cater their response to you and your work. So we have Candace Elder from the Women's Funding Network. She'll be live tweeting this webinar. And if you're part of the social media community, go ahead and join in on this conversation. The Women's Funding Network Twitter handle is @Women'sFunding. And if you want to add a hashtag to any tweets that you have, you can do hashtag WFN webinar. And finally, we are recording today's webinar. I know a lot of you have asked about that. So we'll send it out later today or early tomorrow so that you can share it with your staff or listen to it again so that you can continue this learning. So let's get started. I want to hand the mic over to Jeannie Jackson.
Thanks, Karia. Excited to be here. Thanks for asking us. We kind of have 3 goals today. The first one is to share with other women's funds or other groups that are working with women a new model that we've created in Birmingham to really look at how you encourage collaboration among agencies. The second goal is to really share the benefits for both women's funds and community colleges of forming strong partnerships between these two entities. And then the third one is to share with you kind of what we've learned. We've been doing this for about 3 years, and we have some challenges we face and some lessons we've learned. So hopefully you won't repeat our mistakes. I wanted to just say we're going to have a poll up in a few minutes. Some of you have heard Mary Page or me speak. So just if you've ever heard of Collaboration Institute, it'd be fun to know that before we start. When we began this initiative 3 years ago, we started with looking at the research on women's economic security, something I know that a lot of those participating have also done. And we found some startling results. Unfortunately, some of these startling results are mirrored in national trends. We looked at 3 areas. One was income of women. The second one was educational level of women and the relationship of education to poverty. And the third one was looking at what workforce demands were locally for skilled workers. So let me start off with looking at income levels. Unfortunately, it's not such great news for women head of households. And again, this is unfortunately national trends as well. 5 years ago, it was about a third of all female-headed households with children living in poverty. 5 years later, we're heading towards almost half. So it's pretty dire situation here and nationally. The second thing that we looked at was the median income for women, for female-headed households. In the county that we're going to be talking about today, the main county in Birmingham, income is a little under $30,000. So this is for a woman with 2 children. We compared that to national statistics in terms of what it would cost to really live. And again, probably a lot of you are using these same statistics. This is from an organization called Wider Opportunities for Women. And this organization looks at a living wage, what it would cost to pay all your bills for a woman with 2 children, and they do it regionally. So this is the best estimate of a living wage for a woman in Alabama. So as I noted, it was about $29,000 is the median income. To pay all your bills, to get food, to dress your children, it's going to be closer to $46,000, and that's no extra. Talking about $21 an hour. Unfortunately, in Alabama, the minimum wage remains at $7.25. We're one of a few states, there's just a few of us out there that do not have a state minimum wage. So a lot of the women that we're dealing with are working with $7.25 an hour, pretty far from $21 an hour. Then we looked at educational levels. So we looked at income, and then we looked at educational levels. Education is direct parallel to poverty. And as most of us know, that obviously the more education, the less chance you're going to be in poverty. Without a high school degree, about 30% are going to live in poverty. Once you've got a high school degree, it drops to 17%. Once you have some college or an associate degree, it drops to 14%. And that's kind of where we're targeting. We're targeting women who have high school degrees and encouraging them to get some college. We needed to focus somewhere, so we're not focusing on the poorest of the poor. We're focusing on women who've got high school and then are ready to move on to associate's degree and higher income. Of course, it drops to about 4% when you have a college education. As you can see, it's pretty tough. You've got about 1 out of 8 women, 25% over, who don't even have a high school degree in our area. Another poll question that might be interesting is, are you seeing similar statistics in your area? And I'm just looking at that, and it looks like a lot of you are seeing very similar statistics. So we're talking to the same audience. We then started looking at jobs. In Birmingham, we have a huge healthcare system. It's a major medical center. Lots of demand for skilled workers in healthcare. We also have a large auto manufacturing industry in Alabama because we don't charge a lot of taxes. Mercedes and Honda are glad to come put their plants in a state like Alabama. The good news about that is we also have a lot of advanced manufacturing jobs to supply autos, parts locally to Honda and Mercedes. We then started saying, okay, we've got a dire situation for women. We've got the need for skilled workforce. How are we going to change the status quo? Started looking nationally, and the model that really came to us was one out of the Aspen Institute. It's under their initiative called Ascend. And it's a 2-generation approach. And I know some of the people listening are also connected with this. This is where the Women's Fund is focusing our initiatives almost exclusively. And the 2-generation idea is that you educate the mother, in our situation, post-secondary education, job training, with early childhood education at the same time. So you're educating the mom and her child simultaneously. We're also working at the same time to move women out of poverty and into these in-demand jobs, as we know that her mental health needs to be strong. She can't be living in her car. She has to have some kind of stable housing. And she's going to need support, social support, we're learning that both comes in the way of a counselor as well as peer support, a group of women supporting her. I want to now introduce Mary Page, our program director, and she's going to give more details on how we are moving from the theory, the research, to a practical program.
Thanks, Jeannie. So this is Mary Page talking now. Thank y'all for being here. So what Jeannie has presented is kind of where we were about 4 years ago. And we commissioned a report with our local university to look at these trends in our area. And we did some listening sessions with parents and with agencies around Birmingham to kind of look at some of the roadblocks, to look at some of the barriers that families were facing to accessing the actual multitude of services that we have available here in Birmingham. But one of the problems that kept sticking out to us and that we kept hearing was that these services were so siloed. And this is a kind of a catchphrase in our industry these days, is this idea of a silo, but it's a really good way to describe it. And I'm curious to know if that's how your social service sector is predominantly organized in wherever you're coming from. But in Birmingham, it's a very generous community, and we have lots of nonprofit organizations. But what we're seeing is that for the most part, organizations weren't working very well together. And if they were, it was just kind of a peripheral relationship. It wasn't true collaboration or true collective impact. They weren't really setting out similar goals, setting out common benchmarks, and then setting out common measurables to really look at how to move the entire family forward along an economic and well-being path. And so we moved from our traditional grant-making cycle, which we probably, like most of you, or like a lot of funders, we have a grant cycle every year, and we do an RFP, we take applications, and then we give grants. And so we wanted to move a little beyond that to try to really get to the heart of the issue in our community, because what we were seeing and what some other funders in our community were seeing is that we were giving grants every year, but the needle really wasn't moving for this population. And this population, I mean predominantly young single women with young children. And so we strategized about a new way to go about funding. And out of those conversations and that brainstorming came Collaboration Institute. And so I'm just going to explain Collaboration Institute a little bit, how it works. So the first thing that happens is that teams are formed. So we provide kind of a day of learning, a day of education for the community and for nonprofits in the community. And we invite them to think big, to think about, you know, my program might be better if I could work with this other organization, if we could somehow combine our resources and provide a more robust wraparound support for the families that we work with. And so we give nonprofits in our area the space and the time to do that work and to think about that. And we release an RFP to be part of this institute, which is a 9-month-long curriculum. And so the first thing that happens is these teams are formed, and they apply to us, and they say, look, we've got this idea. We think that if we combine our resources in this way, and if we get a little help, that we might be able to see some of these outcomes. And so part 2 is that the participating teams receive information. We do workshops. We do about 3 workshops on successful collaboration models. So we bring in other groups nationally that have done this really well, other cities that have done this well, and we bring them to Birmingham to talk about, you know, how they did it and how long it took and what it took. And the next thing we did is we get local experts who are experts in consulting, experts in strategic planning, and we get one to work with each team over the next 9 months to help them really meet and strategize and answer the tough questions about staffing and about funding and about how exactly you're going to combine your resources to make this program work. And then we also provide a $2,000 stipend because we know this takes a lot of staff time. It's not just a grant cycle; it's a process. And so we provide a $2,000 stipend for each group that completes the entire institute. And then you have the potential to be awarded up to a $25,000 grant plus an additional $8,000 in funding for an intern for 1 year to just work with the collaborative programming. And so what happens next, as I've already mentioned, is we do another workshop on applied collaboration methods. So we bring in experts nationally to talk about how you do this and the pitfalls to doing this and the challenges. And then session 3 is really more of an independent study where you work with your expert and you design your collaboration. You design a proposal, a grant proposal that you're going to present to us, but then also will be ready and polished and ready to send out to all of the other funders in the area and the region. And then finally, we do, I'm a very big believer in collaborative learning, and so we do final presentations for each other and for the community and for other funders in our community. And this gives the chance for teams to talk about what they've done, the process that they've gone through, and the ideas that they've come up with. And then we have a committee made up of families, of parents who have been part of programs in the past, and some of our funders, and then also some community members and board members. And they select, right now in the past, it's been the top 2 teams to receive startup funding and then to launch their ideas, to launch their programs. So some of our results from previous institutes is we've had 4 teams awarded $25,000 plus the $8,000 intern stipend. We've had 2 additional teams awarded $20,000 from family foundations, so we got some buy-in from other family foundations in the area who were like, this is a really good idea, I really like your program, I'm going to give you $20,000 to see what you can do with it. And then we also had 3 additional teams awarded $15,000 in a similar circumstance. We had a corporation want to invest in this project. And so a permanent collaboration has been established between Habitat and United Way and their savings program IDAs. And these are 2 huge programs in Birmingham, but they had never really worked formally together. And so through Collaboration Institute, they were able to come up with a plan that's actually still sustainable. They've then taken on the cost of this project. And then the next one, which is the one we're going to talk about mostly today, is a collaboration between our local community college, Jefferson State Community College, and Head Start programs, bringing in certificate programs from the community college to the Head Start campus to provide more than just family supports, but to provide post-secondary education for those mothers, especially in Head Start, that are unemployed or underemployed. And then we had a similar program with a dental assistant program created with our local YWCA. And then we've also had wraparound services launched at a rural family resource center for mothers with past criminal charges. Oh, and another interesting one is that a local bank, so we had a private sector and a nonprofit create a collaboration to create matched children's savings account. So now we're going to hear from Gwen to talk about a little bit about Jefferson State's role in all of this and some of the benefits and some of the challenges. And take it away, Gwen.
Thank you, Mary Page. I'm honored to be a part of this. It's a very exciting partnership, and to be able to explain that to you is very exciting for our institution. A little bit of information, a little background about our college. Jefferson State has over 9,000 students on the credit side of the institution and approximately 3,000, 2,500, or 3,000 on the non-credit. I'll tell you a little bit more about it's the non-credit side that we're going to talk about today, and I'll get into that a little more in depth. You know, we often say timing is everything, and it certainly was when this partnership began, as Jenny mentioned, some 3 to 3.5 years ago. Our institution was going through some pretty significant changes. A long-term leader had retired, so we had new leadership and time for a strategic plan. So we were coming off a strategic plan, and one of the things that was overwhelming that came from the plan was that we needed, we had been very successful with our community partnerships, but we needed to expand those. For many years, quite honestly, we had been very successful just being a very large community college that provided what we think is exceptional educational opportunities. But through the plan, we realized that we needed to be more aggressive in that, in serving our constituency and our population. And in particular to that, which is what you're interested in today, and what we're talking about, is that single mothers, women and single mothers. Because what we found, we already knew, obviously, that over 60% of our students are women. You will find that that is pretty typical across the country. And for those of you who are, hopefully all of you are listening, understand the role of community college and has partnerships within your communities and with your community colleges. If not, a quick plug, I encourage you to do so. But so we recognized, so it became a perfect marriage from the beginning. Because we looked into the community and we obviously knew that the Women's Fund was doing this work in the community, so it was an obvious place for us to partner. But that's not enough. Certainly having the two entities come together, but then it's how do we combat and how do we look at the problem. And this is really important, and that is looking at a targeted constituency, and of course in single mothers, which is what we're doing. What we found in this piece, we're in 4 counties, Jefferson obviously being the largest county in Alabama, but we looked at St. Clair County, which is a county that borders. We had strong relationships there because it's very important, I think, or it was to us, it was to the Women's Fund, that we pilot this in an area where we have very strong partnerships. So what did we do? We looked at the barriers, and there are no surprises. The barriers are the same in our community as I suspect that they are for yours. Obviously, the opportunity for that, educational opportunity, the financial opportunity for that, transportation, child care, food, it goes on and on. So what we did is we partnered with a local, as Mary Page said, with a local Head Start. So what we found in recruiting the women, we recruited the women for the program who the children were students at the Head Start. So they have their children down the hall learning through Head Start, and the moms are near them, one where they could see their children, but also their children, and this is very important, their children can see them in that learning environment. To say that this was a phenomenal success was an understatement. We did learn lessons in this. We then partnered with a local church that provided food and meals. The local county provided transportation. But it's really important for our institution that on these non-credit programs, and these are non-credit side of the house, and these are programs that last anywhere from 5 weeks to 6 to 9 months, potentially. We looked at healthcare, as Jenny mentioned, because that's where the jobs are in our region. But it's very important, I cannot emphasize this enough, that there be a credential attached to these jobs. So, I mean, to these opportunities and to this educational. And that's what we did. This has been vital to our success. It has changed the way our institution operates and changed the way that we serve our community, in particular single moms with children. The partnerships are essential, as I mentioned, as well.
Okay, thanks, Gwen. It has been wonderful working with Jeff State. They've just really stepped up. Here's some great pictures of some of the moms. We did pharmaceutical assistant programs, vision assistant, certified medical assistant. We're now moving into advanced manufacturing. So it's been phenomenally. About 250 women gone through these programs and about 350 of their kids in quality child care. Now I think we want to kind of share with you kind of probably why you tuned in is what's working and what's not working. So I want to share a very unexpected outcome was the corporate buy-in for this. We have corporations who support major fundraising event. But we also went to corporations to support Collaboration Institute, the prizes that Mary Page mentioned. These corporations have community outreach people who are seeing the same thing we're seeing. They've been doing silo fundings. They've funded the Y. They have funded Child Care Resources. They funded Jeff State. But they are seeing a rise in poverty and a lack of skilled workforce in Birmingham. So they too are reading the same journals we are and are very familiar with the concept of collective impact that is kind of the buzzword now of organizations working together. So these organizations that we mentioned, the big power company, Blue Cross Blue Shield, Wells Fargo, each contributed between $25,000 and $100,000 for Collaboration Institute. So and they continue to be our partners, and we work closely with them. The next thing that we are seeing with this is our role as a women's fund. We are really a catalyst for change. While we really are working hard to listen, our role and to hear what the community agencies want, we keep pushing, saying there's got to be a better answer. There's got to be somewhere else we can address this increase in poverty. So as a funder and a catalyst, an instigator of change is how we see ourselves. Another important thing that was very effective, it is really hard work for these organizations to collaborate. They are understaffed, underpaid, and so the strategic expert that we assigned to each team was critical to keep everybody on pace in a timeline moving along. We also, and Gwen and I talked about this a lot, for collaborations to work, the head, it needed to be more than Gwen, as wonderful as he is, the head, the acting president of Jeff State Community College had to agree to this. The head of Head Start had to agree. The president of the YWCA had to agree. It can't just be the partnering program person. You need buy-in from senior leadership, which isn't always easy. And some we didn't get, and those didn't work so well. We also saw that working with cohorts of women was critical. So what we ended up funding, I mean, obviously we don't pick the women. We go to other 501c3 groups that have women. Finding women at Head Start who all knew each other was critical. I love the story of one of them. Had a Sunday afternoon study session at her house. They were all struggling in pharmaceutical tech to learn some of the mathematical things that were necessary. So she said, I've got an older daughter. She can babysit. I'll have pizza. Come to my house, and we'll work on the math part for the farm tech. We're seeing 80% graduation from this program, which is amazing, and a lot of that is because the women know each other. Another thing that we've learned is that, as you've heard, the critical role between the community college. I highly, highly recommend partnering with a community college if you're interested in moving women into skilled, higher paid jobs. Working with existing child care centers is been pivotal for us. The highest cost of these programs is child care. So if somebody's already paying for it, if Head Start's got the money covered by the feds, if the Y is raising money for their child care, partner with them. So partner with a community college that gets it, partner with existing child care so that cost is covered. The women's funds can be used then for the course, for a career coach, for textbooks, for gas cards, that kind of thing, and you're not having to pay for child care. The last thing I want to say of lessons we've learned is that we have changed as a women's fund the number of organizations we're funding. We are funding fewer organizations than we did 3 years ago, but we're giving each organization more money, and we're saying we're interested in bigger funding if you're in a position and you are committed to collaboration. If you see collaboration as a beneficial thing for your agency, we are there for you. So the $25,000 awards we've been giving, we're going to bump those up to $100,000 next time around. We've been doing one-off kind of funding where we fund 20 women to go through a dental assistant program. We would like to have permanent 2-gen centers that we invest in. And so we are looking for sustainable long-term partners. So I'm kind of curious as to maybe some of the partners you have. I think we're going to have another poll that look at the type of partners you may have already as a funder that might be interested in collaboration. Your page? Follow up on that?
Yeah, so along the lines of what Jeannie just shared, now we're looking at next steps. So how do we make this maybe not bigger? How do we scale this funding system? How do we, most importantly, how do we make it more sustainable? So right now, you know, $25,000. That's a good chunk of money, but it only goes so far. If you really want to deeply impact a family, or if you want to change the culture of your organization or of your collaboration, it's going to take a bigger investment, and we understand that. So we are now planning our third Collaboration Institute, which we hope to launch in June, and we were really rethinking about how we're going to do this. One of the things that we're going to change is that we are going to do, if you've ever heard of acceleration grants, we're going to structure this more like an acceleration grant process where the initial RFP is a little more robust, and we will only select 2 to 3 teams who are really committed to the idea of taking what they have started and turning it into more sustainable. Right now we're calling it hubs. You know, across the country we've realized that whether it's like places that have single stop or people who are able to utilize family resource centers, that those kind of one-stop places are the most beneficial for families. And so we want to select teams who are committed to this vision, who want to create these kinds of systems in Birmingham. We are also working to contract the Aspen Institute Community Strategies Group, who has done this work for 30 years, in creating more of a peer network learning model between these 2 to 3 teams to really help them work strategically through their action plans to make systems change a reality, at least on the nonprofit level in our community. And before we do all of this fall, we're engaging in listening sessions and in focus groups with both parents and nonprofits in the area who we've worked with and who we haven't worked with to get their ideas around what they think is possible for our community. If they had more resources, if they had more opportunities to collaborate, what would they come up with? I'm really interested in building on the energy that they already have, that they're already working towards, and it's our role to just light a fire and help provide the resources and contract out the expertise to make that happen. Like I just said, we really want to encourage on-site family resource centers, one-stop centers at community colleges or at child development centers or at already established family resource centers to help make them a little stronger. And then, like Jeannie said, we want to up our funding game. We want to be able to provide, which we are on our way to doing already, we want to be able to provide $100,000 of capital to launch these collaborative proposals, with the teams also pledging to raise an additional $50,000 to help get them on the way to make these sustainable projects. And yeah, and then finally, you know, we want these sustainable models to be replicated. You know, I see us in maybe a year after this creating some toolkits that we could then share with other cities, with other organizations to help do this. And because the way that we have learned how to do this is by looking at other projects around the country that have done this very well and have been working for 10, 15 years on making this happen in their communities. So, oh yeah,
I'm
sure.
just gonna add 2 more points to that. One is this is a big shift for us, and I know that probably a lot of people listening are women's funds or funders. We're small. We have a staff of 5. This is not a huge organization, but our board is really committed to saying we are in this for the long haul. We have got to look at a more systemic, long-term approach to addressing poverty, or we're supporting organizations doing good things, but we're not changing the number of women in poverty. So it was a major board decision, and it is a huge switch for us to do fewer grants and to fund big time collaboration for us in Birmingham. The other thing I want to point out, well, I mentioned that the corporate buy-in has been pretty phenomenal. They are helping us select these teams. They're helping us work with the team, select the experts. They'll be involved with the Aspen group. We also went to some family foundations, some large family foundations in Birmingham, and said, we would like to stream some of the funding in Birmingham. We'd like to combine our funding. The Women's Fund is putting in a lot of money. We've committed $5 million over the next 5 years to this, which again is a big step for us. We would like you to partner with us. We would like you to step up and join us so that these can become centers, one-stop centers at family resource centers, and they have. So that's another thing I encourage you to do, to talk to your board, to look at how you're doing funding, to decide if your funding is creating change, and then to go talk to some big corporations and family foundations in your town and saying things aren't working well. They're not, the statistics are bad. Join us in taking a risk. Join us in taking a risk and trying something different.
Yeah, thanks, Jeannie. So what we think is the most important part of these kinds of webinars are your questions, because that helps us fill in any gaps. It also helps us learn from you and how we can do things better. So I would now like to open it up to questions for us. And Kari, you may want to explain a little bit how they can ask questions.
Yeah, thank you, Mary Page. So I'm seeing that there's been a couple of questions come in during the presentation, and looks like some people have raised their hand. So I want to give people a chance to ask those questions. But as a reminder, if you want to ask your question by typing it, you can type it into the chat box in your control panel, or you can raise your hand. There's a little hand icon that you can click on, and I can unmute you. So Terry Morgan, I want to make sure that you have a chance to ask your question. So I will go ahead and unmute you now, and then I'll go ahead and share some of the other questions that have come in. Terry, you're unmuted now. Well, it looks like there's some technical issue there. So why don't we go ahead and talk about the other questions first as we figure that out. So I know that you mentioned, Jeannie, you said, find your statistics, present them to corporations or family foundations in your community. And someone said in the beginning, they asked about where you locate, where, your best advice for locating the statistics for what it costs to live in your community or pay your bills. So could you talk a little bit more about the best sources for gathering statistics?
Sure. So this is Mary Page. I'll take this one. So we did a lot of analysis of census data. So using the American Community Survey on census.gov. It's pretty simple to use. You can really tailor it to your needs and get lots of spreadsheets of raw numbers. You then have to analyze them, but you can get the numbers that you are looking for. We also, because at the time, like I and the previous program director were the only ones to do this, we contracted with our local university to help us do this. And so, we combined our research with the research that they did. We also did listening sessions where we got some more anecdotal evidence to combine with our raw numbers. But there's also like labor reports that come out for your region are also really helpful, especially to see, for our purposes, we were looking for where jobs are. But census.gov has become my best friend. But then also working with a local evaluation partner to help you with that analysis.
Another great source is the Institute of Women's Policy
Yes.
Research. It's in Washington. It's IWPR. They did a great report. If any of you are from the South, and the status of the South, unfortunately, Alabama ranked as a D-, so we certainly do not lack for work to do. But it's very approachable material. They also, I know the Mississippi Women's Fund hired them to do some work with their community colleges. So they are a resource. So IWPR is another group that very approachable, targeted information for women.
Thank you, Jeannie. I really appreciate sharing those resources. And in the wrap-up email, we'll be sure to send links to all of those resources as well, just in case you're not able to take notes right now. Another question that came in is asking about a toolkit. So at present, is there a toolkit for the model that you're using?
There's not. We don't have one, but I do have one to recommend. So this is Mary Page again, sorry. So we don't have one for this funding model developed yet, which we should definitely do. But if you're interested in this type of 2-gen work, especially working with post-secondary education systems and institutions, the Los Angeles Valley Community College has just come out with a toolkit with their Family Resource Center has just come out with a toolkit, and I highly recommend it. It is it's excellent, and you can kind of look through it and see, like, okay, what could we do? Okay, who do we need to convince to make this happen? And so as a women's fund, if I'm assuming most of your women's funds who are looking at this, you can look at that and kind of see, oh, what role can we play in this? How can we, again, using the word catalyze, how can we catalyze some of this work? How can we bring some of the partners together that will make this work happen? Also, to the previous question, which some of you may know, many of you may know, but Ascend at the Aspen Institute is always coming out with new research, and it's not going to be locally focused data, but it's more field data. But we have found it very useful and very helpful, especially if you're trying to educate your board or some of your community partners, if you're trying to bring them in on the conversation. It's been really helpful.
The last thing that I mentioned, this is Jeannie. There's a group in Boston called Empath that used to be the Crittenden Women's Fund or whatever. And they have a program that you can actually join and be part of, be a member of theirs. It's called Mobility Mentoring. And the person who's our career counselor at Jeff State uses this model. She's gotten some real good tips for it. And they, if you become a member of Empath, it's EMPATH out of Boston, the Mobility Mentoring is a set copyable program that we've kind of done bits and pieces. We haven't adopted the whole thing, but we've done bits and pieces of it, and it's there for your use.
Thanks, Jeannie. So another question came in about financial resources. The question is, please summarize the financial resources that you needed to commit to when you started up the Collaboration Institute. One of them first being the key elements of the budget and how much you budgeted for these key elements.
Okay, the first year we kind of did it by a little bit by the seat of our pants. Mary Page and I, we were staff of 3 then. We're now staff of 5. And at that point, it was a lot of staff time doing it. We were able to get the donations for the $25,000 prizes. Mainly, most of that was from corporate money. We had a $50,000 grant from Wells Fargo. We had another grant from Alabama Power, about the same amount. So I would say probably the first year we did it for about 100,000 total, if you include our time.
A little over.
A little over that. It was a little over that.
I would say 150. I don't have the budget in front of me.
Yeah, and we would be glad to share that budget with you. Obviously, the second year we had a nice thing. We invited a lot of people to the presentations because our idea is we wanted to leverage funding. So we weren't going to be able, there were 5 teams the second time around. We weren't going to be able to fund all 5 teams. We were only going to be able to fund 2 at the budget, but of say $150,000. And so we invited some corporations and some family foundations to come in, and that's where you saw the additional money. Some of it was from Alabama Power. Some of it was two small family foundations that just loved the work. And they came up to me afterwards and said, we want to fund another one. So we were able to fund, I guess, 4 out of the 5 to some level, some more than others. And the 5th one, to be perfectly honest, just wasn't ready to roll. It was a good idea. They just had not had the staff time to be able to develop it. There were too many questions. This year we're going pretty big time. So with Collaboration 3, we are looking at a budget more like $400,000. We want to give 4 or 5, yeah, again. It's still, Mary Page is expected to give that to me before I finish my budget for the year, for next year.
My deadline's today, so I'm still thinking about this.
We'll be able to answer your question soon. We're talking $400,000 or $500,000. It's going to be a big chunk of change, about $75,000 or so, to hire the Aspen group to come down here. Mary Page and I have been kind of figuring this out. They know what they're doing, and if we're going to bump this thing up to permanent sustainable centers, we knew we needed to bring in some outside people. We're good, but they really know what they're doing. We also would like, our goal is to be able to give $300,000 prizes. And so for Collaboration Institute 3, we'd like to start 3 2-gen hubs. The commitment of the Women's Fund is by 2020 we'll have 5. And they're going to look very different, but that's our goal. So I would say $150,000 budget to start, up to $500,000 if you are committed to taking this thing to really where you're going to put your eggs in that basket.
And I will also say that, you know, we had to make some institutional decisions. We had to convince our board to reallocate some of our own money into this project. So that meant sometimes giving a few less dollars in our regular grant cycle in order to really kind of fund this risk-taking venture that we came up with. But I think it's been worth it.
And so this year, we still are doing a grant cycle, but we give priority to grants that are doing collaborative work. Our grant cycle is developed around pretty much the Aspen goal of economic security, which is education, child care, health care, and asset accrual, which could be housing or savings account, that kind of thing. So we still are doing that. Our board is going to relook at this this winter, and say, how do we balance the money for Collaboration Institute as opposed to our grant cycle, and kind of make a decision on that. It has also kind of another unexpected outcome, in addition to the money, has been a shift in where we're looking to do advocacy. based on this, we realized that there are some huge elephants in the room in terms of barriers for women succeeding, low-income women moving into these in-demand jobs. And I don't think anybody's been talking about them. And the biggest one is obviously funding of childcare. And so we're going to be looking at that. We're going to be looking at minimum wage. We're going to be looking at paid sick leave. So this process has also shifted us in our advocacy work to really looking at workforce challenges for women. And so I see our Women's Fund putting less into our traditional grant cycle, more into Collaboration Institute, and more into advocacy for workplace changes.
So there's a lot of questions that are coming in, and I'm trying to sort of group them all together so that we can answer all of them in the next few minutes. And a lot have come in around partnering and how to start a conversation. And this is really a question for everyone here. Maybe we'll start, Gwen, we'll start with you. So how should a women's fund specifically, how should they begin a conversation with a community college about starting a partnership like this? Like, who should they go to first? Jeannie, I know you mentioned it takes senior leadership buy-in, and it can't just be the buy-in from the program director at the community college. But if you could share some advice around who to talk to first, how the conversation might look, and what expectations or what the expectations might be around the conversation, what it will morph into, that would be really helpful.
Yes, I think, the missions of community colleges, whether you're in an urban area, a rural area, or any part of the country, the missions of community college are virtually the same. And so you start with that. I think what's important also with no matter the size of the college, there's someone in that college generally that's working with credit sides of education. Those are transfer courses that most of us probably on this phone or on this webinar are familiar with. And then there's non-credit, which we talked about. I think it's probably just as simple as reaching out and understanding your community college and how that aligns, because every community is different, therefore every community college is a little different, but the mission's the same. The conversation, I dare say that the community colleges, they will get it, and here's why. The reason this works so well, as I stated from the beginning, our missions are so aligned. Our students, those that we serve and those that the Women's Fund are serving, they really are the same students. So you really look at it, partnerships are so important to community colleges. We had a former president of our institution that said, if we are not wrapped around the community and the community is not wrapped around us, we're not doing our jobs. That is about the best example that I can give you. When the information was presented to us, much of it we knew, but much of it we did not. When we saw these statistics, that's not good enough. We are not succeeding until we can move these women from poverty into high-paying jobs and jobs that they can support their families. So it's really it's an easy conversation. And then it's up to, I think it's generally best that unless you have those relationships, you don't start with the president, because the president will probably tell you, yes, this is very important, and we're doing that, and we think that's important. But that you start with, you start with someone in administration, obviously, who can take care of that and who can help you with that. I think there's some things you should probably not do in a partnership. And they may be obvious, but one I would mention to you is that, sometimes academia can be a little sensitive about what we're not doing. And that is, we keep talking about and using the words collaboration, partnership. There's a reason that this works. It's because, when the Women's Fund, when Jenny and the Women's Fund came to us, or when we got involved in the institutes, we recognized that, hey, we are really all in this together. So I think one of the obvious mistake would be is, you guys are not solving this problem, rather than the conversation to be, we are as a community not solving this problem, so how do we join forces and make that happen. And that was very important. One more thing that's very important, I think, and it plays to this. We started in an area that we felt we had the greatest chance for success, and then we branched out because we wanted to have the best chance possible to succeed, because we all know how funders can be. We might just have one shot at this. So we recognized that we were playing long ball, but we wanted successes immediately, and we got them. Had we not had those successes immediately, I think, this conversation today might be very different. You've heard the lessons learned, and we have, and we continue to learn lessons. But it's important, too, that you have the best chance you can possibly be as you begin this program, and looking at those partnerships with that community college or whomever you partner with, that educational institution. And they'll be able to help align those with you as community funders.
So on the same note, what is it like, Jeannie and Mary Page, what is it like to start to develop relationships or conversations with corporate partners? And did you notice any political obstacles when you started these conversations? Maybe you sensed them from the corporations?
I'll take that one a little bit. It varied. I think that for women's funds, the positive is we have a good reputation, and so we have a lot of credibility. We have a very strong board, and the board is very connected in the community. So that helped us walk in the door. The thing that you hear, and this is not surprising to anybody on there, and actually I heard this the other day, is they see us as refunding. And so, you have to, it takes patience and clarity to explain collaboration and Collaboration Institute. It's complex. It's not going and asking them to fund, the Heart Association ball. And so it's taken some time. There's been education. It's bringing them to Collaboration Institute, bringing their community people, and sometimes the president. To that, I met with the head of AT&T the other day, and he gets it. He just, you find people who get it. I met with somebody else who I'll be honest, I just don't think he got it. And so I think that being patient, trying to simplify it, and being clear when you go talk to very busy corporate people, I think Gwen's point is very good. We're in this together. They are dying for a skilled workforce in Birmingham. We have openings in healthcare jobs, and they're not being filled. They are advanced technology. We are just beginning to move into associate's degrees. And so we do that. And we have changed our language very intentionally. It is workforce development. It is workforce development. It depends on, to my board, it's about, moving women into sustainable jobs and self-dignity and self-respect and being able to pay for food and diapers. With corporate, it is, you are looking for a workforce. We have a group of women who have high school degrees, who are drug-free, who are ready to go back to school. They have taken the initiative. We are just helping them move along. We are providing an opportunity to guarantee success. So it is very different conversations with corporate funders. Not so much local family foundations. They get it.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of code switching that Jeannie's very good at. I'm not. But with corporate, and we're almost done. But with corporations, it's typically, and this is a gross generalization, but it's typically about presenting numbers and presenting facts and doing in a succinct and clear way to show that what is being done currently is not working, and we've got to together figure out a better way to move our community forward. And when you present it almost like a business model, it seems to work better.
Yeah, we have a case statement. We're in a silent phase of a $5 million campaign, and it's going really well. It's not something I want public, but if any of you would like to see, is very geared towards both corporation and large family foundations. I'm glad to share that. it's about convincing them that we're in it together, as Gwen said, to change Birmingham.
All right, I know we've gone over a little bit, but the questions keep pouring in. So if you don't mind asking, listening and answering one more, that would be really great. And then I know that we've shared the email addresses on the last slide, so folks can certainly reach out and ask questions offline. So the last question has to do with timeline development and choosing your focus areas. So what happened from phase 1 grants, phase 2, and now what is the development of phase 3 in June of 2017 looking like?
So we only can do it every other year. I mean, again, we are really a small staff. It's really been Mary Page and me who've done this pretty much whole thing. We had a AmeriCorps volunteer who helped a little bit the first year. And so staff-wise, every other year was all we could do. We also realized it is a long process, and it takes a good 9 months for these teams to kind of meet and figure out when they can meet and get together and then get the expert meeting with them. It's a slow process.
And then we have an additional year after that to do evaluation. So we're not gonna. So it's a little different from just like a yearly grant cycle. We went to seed funding, start the program, and then take a year to see how it's working and to see what can be changed. And so that's another big reason we do it every other year.
And that timing's not just important for the Women's Fund, that timing is also important for the partners. Because if you have had experience with educational entities, but we don't always turn on a dime. So we have our own set of challenges around that. I will tell you now that having been through the process for these years now that we've been involved, it's about as smooth we think as it can be, but we had to get to that point. So it also is important for the educational partners as well. That timing it really is crucial.
And to your question, it's changed in the way that, our first two, we had really good ideas and they got funded for a year. And one of the issues is that for some we've had to just keep funding them at $25,000 in order for them to continue. And what we would really like to see with the bigger investment and bigger, because professional development piece or think piece is to help organizations create some culture change so that this can become a sustainable part of their model, of their service model. And so that's what we're trying to change. We don't know how to do that yet, but we're working on it.
And I think we're going to see some pushback a little bit when we ask the agencies to come up with a match. So I think that's gonna be an interesting thing. We are interested in being a catalyst. We are interested in supporting the agencies. We also are interested in these things continuing in the long run. There are no new buildings. There are no new programs. It is what we currently have and joining forces. But I think for it to continue, there not only has to be a time, but also a financial buy-in of those organizations.
Yeah, there's lots of services. They just need to be better aligned to work better for families.
This is not necessarily to that question, but I would be remiss if I didn't say this. The director of the program here at Jefferson State who has responsibility over this has been in education entities for approximately 25 years. And this is what she says, that this experience with the Women's Fund and this program has been the most rewarding of her career. I came into education from a political beginnings, and I can tell you this, that what's been so rewarding for me and so rewarding for our institution, we are seeing immediate results, immediate in the sense of being able to take women doing the work and going through these programs and literally moving from poverty to jobs. Because when we get down to it, that's what this is about. It's about getting women out of poverty and into the jobs. And so it's been so incredibly rewarding. And what we tell everybody, because it's the way we view this, is that this is not a one-time partnership for us or a 3-year partnership for us. We consider this to be a partnership for our institution for as long as there's a women's fund and there's a Jefferson State Community College and there's a need.
Well, there's a few more questions, but I'm going to have to suggest that everyone touch base offline and keep the conversation going. We can't wait to continue to see the success of this of the Collaboration Institute, and we hope that that you all start to share some impact stories from collaborations in your own communities. So thank you so much to everyone. I think about 20 women's funds joined us today on the call. You all engaged in really great dialogue, and thank you so much to our speakers, Jeannie, Mary Page, and Gwen. It was really great to have all of you on the webinar. Please stay tuned to your inboxes for an invitation for next week's webinar. It's all about fundraising, so we hope to see a lot of you there. And again, the recording will be sent out later today or early tomorrow. So stay tuned for that and have a great week.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank y'all.
Thank you.